Welcome to New Connection, where you can tune in and grow. I'm your host, Vicki Thompson. You may be familiar with New Connection magazine, which has been enjoyed by readers in the Pacific Northwest for more than 20 years. On New Connection TV, we welcome authors, practitioners, and visionaries to share new ideas for alternative health, spirituality, and personal growth. Today, I'd like to welcome to New Connection Paul O'Brien, who is the author of Visionary I Ching, the book of changes for the 21st century. Paul, welcome to New Connection.
Thank you, Vicki. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited to talk about the I Ching. It's such an ancient, revered system. Can you tell us a bit about it and how it's used?
It's actually the oldest book in the world, but it's far more than a book. It's a divination system, or what you might call an oracle system, along the lines perhaps of things that people might be more familiar with, like tarot cards, etc. But it's 4,000 years old. It comes out of ancient China. It's a Taoist classic, and it embodies the wisdom that's behind the martial arts, Chinese medicine, Chinese astrology, feng shui. But it's primarily used to help people make better decisions, and it was used by emperors and sages for thousands of years.
How did you get into using the I Ching?
Well, it all started when I grew up in the Bay Area during the 1960s, when everything counterculture was flourishing, and I became exposed to Eastern metaphysics and Chinese philosophy, Taoism, and Buddhism. And one day on the campus of the University of California, a young lady who I found very attractive
Yeah.
wanted to show me this system that she had for answering questions, for giving advice, and helping people make better decisions. So I went along with it, but I have to admit, at that young age, in my teenage years, I was a bit of a smart aleck, and I basically was much more interested in her than any kind of flaky trick that she might have. So I went along with it, and she said, okay, think of a question and write it down. And so I wrote down something that meant nothing to me, really, and I was basically making fun of the whole thing. And so then she showed me how to cast the coins 6 times, and that's how you do it. You develop a pattern from casting the coins 6 times while you're concentrating on your question. Well, I wasn't concentrating on my question. I was kind of making fun of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did that, and then she looks it up in the big book, which was the Wilhelm Baines version of the I Ching, which has the foreword by Carl Jung, the great depth psychologist. And she looks it up, and what do I get but hexagram number 4, which is entitled Youthful Folly. Now, the gist of hexagram number 4 is that the student lacks respect for the teacher. And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. I mean, it completely ignored my question, but my question had no merit to begin with. It wasn't important to me, and I wasn't even thinking about it, and it reflected my smart aleck energy and called me on it.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what seemed to be happening. Well, that made me a little more curious about it, so I said, hey, let me try that again. And so then I wrote down something else that I didn't particularly care about. Just this time my intent was to test it. So I cast the coins and got another hexagram, and she looked it up, and it had text in this hexagram. I don't remember whether it was the hexagram difficulty at the beginning or the hexagram humility, but I remember the text very clearly because it grabbed me so much. And it said, questioning the sincerity of the seeker. And I thought, oh my God, this time I'm testing it, and it comes back and tests me. So that's when I had this epiphany. It certainly strengthened my interest and curiosity in it to see that it was reflecting my energy no matter how I tried to manipulate it or no matter how I tried to abuse or make fun of it. It was going to just reflect that energy back to me. It wasn't going to take any guff from me. So I gained some respect for it, and I started using it, and I've been using it for every major personal decision in my adult life ever since. And that's how it started. Then I became very interested in it and I studied it for years. It got me interested in Carl Jung's work in general. And Carl Jung, probably more than anybody, defined how the I Ching works and how divination systems in general work, because he came up with this concept of archetypes, these energetic sources of power that exist in what he called the collective unconscious that we can draw upon. That's where all new ideas come from. That's where all creative thought comes from. And that's what the I Ching consists of. It's got 64 chapters called hexagrams. Each one of them is an archetype, like youthful folly is one of those. And so it's a collection of archetypes that basically describe a variety of human experiences or situations or dynamics that are possible in the world of social affairs or political affairs or even business dealings that we might bump up against, that are all inside of us. And so that's the theory about archetypes. All of these archetypes are actually inside of you to begin with, every single one of them. Same thing is true of tarot cards. You've got 78 cards, that's 78 archetypes. And then, of course, there are all the mythological archetypes, the gods and goddesses and different qualities, the sage, the great mother, etc. So Jung defined all kinds of archetypes, but he was particularly taken by the I Ching because he saw that this was a system that used archetypes in order to produce reflections that are going to help people make better decisions, stimulate their intuition. And then he came up with the synchronicity principle, partly as a result of trying to figure out how the I Ching worked. And the synchronicity principle is the other major factor of a divination system. And the synchronicity principle says that everything that happens at a given moment in time is related to everything else that's happening at that same moment in time. And so if you can get a fix or a mapping on a moment in time, you can tell something about the general quality of that moment that's going to be relevant to whatever you're focused on at the same time, because you're focused on it when you cast the coins and create the pattern. So basically, a shorthand way of describing the synchronicity principle is that there are no accidents. Everything happens for a reason, and things are related in time as well as in space. Now, physics and science, Western science, it's all about how things are related in space. And it's basically, in the West, we've been trying to answer the question, what are things made of? And how do we do that? We analyze them, we take them apart, we put them back together and see what happens. So it's a very logical process that has to do with the relationship between things in space or things in the material realm. But we don't even take into consideration the element of time. I mean, we have expressions that we intuitively understand that timing is everything, but we don't take it into account in science or in the scientific method. For instance, if I perform a controlled experiment on Tuesday morning and I perform that same controlled experiment Sunday in the middle of the night, I expect it to come out exactly the same, and I don't factor in the time at all. Well, in the East, going way back thousands of years, they were interested in answering a different kind of question. Rather than being obsessed with what are things made of, and by the way, we've done incredible things by examining what are things made of and figuring that out. I mean, scientific and technological breakthroughs in medicine and technology, etc. It's fantastic what we've been able to do taking that approach. But they were interested in a different question. They were interested in answering the question, what kinds of things go together in time? So they were very interested in timing. And of course, this is a question that is very relevant to the world of love affairs and politics and negotiations and waging war, perhaps. Timing is such an important issue, and they were very focused on that. And that's what the I Ching was designed to help them with.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about timing. You've shared that in the responses that you've gotten from the I Ching, Some of them might be hard to follow. Can you share what you found?
Well, if you don't care about timing, I wouldn't do the I Ching in the first place because that's what it really shines at. That's the kind of questions that it's good for. It's not going to give you answers to questions like where should I go to lunch today or what's the weather going to be like tomorrow. It basically generates advice. It stimulates your intuition to think outside the box around timing questions or relationship questions. Now, we don't always get answers that we like, as my story about my discovery of the I Ching illustrates. We get reflections on that moment in time that don't care about what answers we want, what our ego wants to hear. We're basically getting a reflection. Now, I have found in my use of the I Ching over the last 40 years that it always gives me one of three different kinds of responses. I've never seen this written up anywhere, but it's been my observation that it either tells you to assert yourself and fix it in order to affect change, or do nothing but wait and allow things to change on their own because this too shall pass. Or number three, run like hell, retreat, get out of there. So that's always a kind of an interesting thing for me, and sometimes that's the only thing I'm looking for. Like for instance, if I ask the question, is this a good time to call so and so? It's going to give me one of those three kinds of indicators, and I'm just going to go with that, and I'm not even going to worry too much about the specific text, because the average I Ching reading, it's about 4 paragraphs long. So it's going to give me an idea about whether I should try to fix it, or whether I should let it pass, or whether I should retreat. Now, in the West, we don't have that much flexibility, unless we've taken martial arts, perhaps, because we have like one solution to every problem, and that is fix it now. You know, we're in a hurry, we're type A, we want to make change happen, we want to control things, and we want to assert ourselves. And we have assertiveness trainings. We don't have too many trainings in waiting.
It's true.
We certainly don't have any trainings in retreating.
It's true.
I suppose the only training in waiting might be meditating, which is basically what's going on there. So I have found that very helpful. It's made me much more flexible to realize I don't always have to take action. I don't always have to try to make things happen.
So the I Ching has been around for thousands of years, but you've created a contemporary version of it. What motivated you to create a modern version of the I Ching?
Well, after using it for many years, I realized the limitations of it, particularly in conjunction with the studies that I brought to it, researching the history of it, buying every version I could find. I must own about 20 different versions of the I Ching.
Wow.
And the one that everybody sort of hearkens to was the first one that I was introduced to, which is the Wilhelm Baines Princeton version, with the intro by Carl Jung. Well, the intro by Carl Jung in and of itself is worth the price of admission to that version. But I became aware of the fact that that version, even though it's considered the most orthodox and it's the best-selling version, is not necessarily the best version from the point of view of authenticity going back to the ancient Taoist wisdom, because it was a product of the Ming Dynasty of the 19th century, which is when Wilhelm got a hold of it like around 1900 and translated it into German. And it's very patriarchal, and it represents a very patriarchal flavor that is more about Confucianism than Taoism. And it's very militaristic. It has expressions in it like, the army is marching to the southwest. Well, personally, I don't care what the army's doing, and I'm not sure what moving to the southwest means. And then it has expressions like, the superior man does this and the superior man does that, so it was kind of sexist. And I thought, we can do a lot better than that. We need a new, modern version of the I Ching that is a little bit more Taoist and less Confucian, that's non-patriarchal, that's certainly non-sexist and non-militarist for modern times. And so I never thought to do anything about it until I was inspired in 1989 to create the world's first software version of the I Ching, which was a program named Synchronicity, that I named Synchronicity. And at the time, I was the vice president of marketing for a software company in the high-tech industry. And I found myself using the I Ching at work once in a while. And I thought, wow, I sure would like it if I could do this on my computer. And this was before the age of CD-ROMs. There were no CD-ROMs in 1989. And there were no multimedia computers except for one, that tiny little Macintosh in the shape of an ice cube. That thing could handle graphics. So I got the idea, I wonder if I could do an I Ching on the computer in a software format that could give some graphics like a Japanese garden and some soothing sounds that would facilitate the kind of mood, the kind of meditative state of mind that would be ideal for an I Ching reading. And that just captured my imagination and led to my career as an entrepreneur, because I took my entire life savings and I designed something like that. I hired a grad student and an artist and actually ended up creating one of the first multimedia titles, which was on 2 floppy disks at the time, which was an interactive version of the I Ching.
So you actually consulted the I Ching to see if you should create the software version of it. Can you share that story?
Yeah, I didn't know whether I should do this or not, or whether it was an irreverent thing to do or not. So I did a reading about whether I should create a software version of the I Ching itself. So I used the I Ching to inform that decision within myself, and I got the hexagram enthusiasm. It was totally positive. I thought, oh
Awesome.
my God, well, here I was about to spend my entire life savings and then some. It wasn't a trivial thing. I had never developed a software program before, but I was missing a pretty vital component, which was the rights to any of the versions of the I Ching, which are all copyrighted. And so I more or less had to write my own version in order to do this thing that I wanted to do. And then I really got into that. That was very inspiring, and that's when I decided I'm going to make one that's non-sexist, non-militarist, less Confucian, more Taoist, more poetic, more lighthearted, and just generally more accessible to a modern audience, to the individualistic Western audience.
Well, something that we've been showing on screen are the beautiful paintings that you've included with this version of the I Ching. Can you tell us a little bit about the artist and the inspiration behind those?
Well, that came much later because CD-ROMs did come around about 6 or 7 years later, and I decided to do a CD-ROM version, which I wanted to have beautiful art, and I wanted to have a soundtrack. And so I hired an artist and specified 64 paintings. This had never been done. There had never been an illustrated version of the I Ching. And then since then, I came across artist Joan Larimore, who is the artist of the paintings that we use now, and she had a whole collection of 64 paintings, one for each of the I Ching hexagrams, because she loved the I Ching as much as I did, and they already existed, and she was selling this art. And so I made a proposal to her: how would you like me to use scans of your art as the illustration in this book that I want to, or in this new software that I want to make, which has now become the ebook that we're just publishing, which is called The Visionary I Ching. So there's been this evolution, and we've never put it out in a book format before. And so now we have it in this ebook format that is very convenient, because you can read it on your iPhone, you can take it or your Android phone, you can take it on an iPad, you can take it on your laptop computer and have access to this incredible tool wherever you are at your convenience.
And a special gift that you're offering today to our viewers is a free version of the I Ching.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this ebook, which we are going to publish, well, we've already published the free gift for viewers of New Connection TV that you can get at divination.com/freebook. Now, there's no links on the site that lead to that. This is a secret page that we set up just for this occasion, Vicki, and I'm very happy to be able to offer it for free in PDF format for any of our viewers today.
Wonderful. So, Paul, you're writing another book on visionary decision making. How does that relate to the I Ching?
I Ching is one tool that you can use to support intuitive decision making. And now I'm writing a book that's much broader in scope called Great Decisions, Perfect Timing. It should be published in September of 2013. And it's basically about the importance of making good decisions in your life and improving your timing. And the I Ching is one tool. There's a whole chapter on divination in the book, but the book is much broader than that. And it's basically dealing with the perception that the most critical thing that we do as human beings is making decisions. You know, we have this incredible capacity to visualize different possible outcomes to choices we might take, and yet, when it comes to decision making, we're terrible. We're either too emotional and impulsive, or we're too analytical and procrastinating. And we've got to do better. I mean, the fate of the world depends on it, not to mention our personal success and happiness. Nothing determines your success and happiness more in life than the quality of the decisions that you make. And it's the job that we pay CEOs and political leaders enormous amounts of resources and power to affect for us. And we need to do it for ourselves because everybody is the CEO of their own life. So there's a whole system, the 7 pillars of visionary decision making that we define in this book, divination being one of them. And that is really what the Divination Foundation is all about. The mission of the Divination Foundation, the nonprofit I set up after I sold the software company that published the I Ching and Tarot and astrology and became the world's largest astrology website, I set up a nonprofit immediately so that I could do the work that I really am called to do, which is to help people make better decisions, improve their timing, reduce their stress, and support the collective good.
Well, you've really done a great job of it, and I'm really impressed with the way you can navigate through this book and your future book. So it sounds like you are making this really accessible to the masses and using it as a change management tool.
Well, that's all I want to do, Vicki. I was called to produce the world's first divination software and then the world's largest divination website, and I did very well. And now I'm in the last third of my life and I want to give back. I'm doing exactly what I want to do, and I'm so happy doing it, and I really appreciate being on your TV show today to tell people about it, because we do want people to take advantage of this free copy and become familiar. There's chapters in the Visionary I Ching ebook that explain all the things we talked about today and how to get the most benefit from it, how to use it. It's pretty self-explanatory, and I think people are going to enjoy that. And we're also coming out with the Visionary I Ching app for the iPhone and Android, iPad, etc., which should be out within a couple weeks of this broadcast. So I hope people will tune back in to divination.com and take a look at that, because that's going to be a lot of fun. Now that one's going to cost money, but all proceeds go to the nonprofit work of the Divination Foundation.
So for someone who may not be familiar with the I Ching, what are some of the benefits of using it?
Well, better decisions, better relationships, less stress, less anxiety about changes. It's a way to stimulate your intuition to think outside the box around problems that logic can't handle. If logic could handle it, fine, it's a great tool. But there's some of the most important personal issues logic can't handle it all by itself. Like we said, relationships, negotiations, timing. There's a whole slew of important questions that science doesn't even consider itself with, because we can't define the mind. We can't define intuition. There's all of these things that we can't define scientifically. These are the things where we need the most help. So that's basically what it's for.
For tapping in greater to that. So Paul, you've shared some amazing stories about readings, but beyond that first reading you had, were there other ones that made you laugh or surprised you?
Oh, I've had so many, I couldn't even tell you. I mean, I don't use the I Ching that often. I only use it about once a month. I only use it when I have a problem that logic can't handle. But I've gotten a lot of interesting responses, and I'll tell you this, I can't name one really funny one. Some of them have cracked me up pretty good. But I can tell you that it has helped me think outside the box so many times, and my attitude is, if it gives me one new idea, if it gives me one new thought, it's done its job. And that really can be helpful, because we usually think in black and white terms. We're either going to, we usually think we only have two choices. And I like to say we always have more than two choices. We just don't always see the third one. And the I Ching is there to provide some ideas for us along those lines.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You can learn more about divination at our website at newconnectionjournal.com. Join us next time on New Connection, where you can tune in and grow.